All right, today we're diving into some of the most influential texts ever written, the Gospels. Now, we all know they're foundational to Western culture, but what kind of writing are they, really? I mean, are they straight up history, biography, something else entirely? To figure this out, we're going to have to treat this like a full-on literary investigation. So, to solve this ancient literary puzzle, we're not going to get bogged down in theology or traditional history. Nope. Instead, we're going to put on our detective hats and look at the literary form of the Gospels. We're hunting for clues hidden right there in the text itself. As we examine the evidence, we find there are basically four main theories about what genre the Gospels belong to. You can think of them as our four primary suspects in this case. So let's look at the evidence for and against each one. And we'll start with the most obvious culprit. Okay, clue number one. Are they ancient biographies? I mean, this seems like a no-brainer, right? They tell the life story of one person, Jesus. So, case closed, their biographies. But it's not that simple. When you actually compare them to what we think of as a biography today, some really interesting differences pop up.
So when you look at the evidence, the Gospels don't really fit our 21st century idea of a biography. The authors aren't detached, objective observers, and they skip over a ton of key dates and facts you'd expect to see. But here's the twist. They align surprisingly well with something called ancient popular biography. And for those writers, it wasn't just about listing facts. The whole point was practical. It was to inspire the reader, to encourage you to imitate this great person. This is a huge piece of evidence for this theory, for sure.
All right, let's move on to our next suspect. And this one's, well, it's a bit more controversial. Are they propaganda? Now, that's a loaded word, I know. But some people argue that because the Gospels are obviously trying to persuade you of a certain viewpoint, that's what they are. So let's be careful here and just look at the evidence. So how does this hold up? Well, on the for side, the Gospels absolutely want to convince you of something, to trust in Jesus. No doubt about it. But then you look at the against column. They don't use the kinds of manipulative techniques we think of with propaganda. Playing on fears, prejudices. You don't really see that. The authors almost never jump in with their own evaluative comments. They kind of just let the events and Jesus' actions tell their own story. It's a remarkably restrained approach.
Okay, suspect number 3 is a really fascinating idea. What if the Gospels are a form of dramatic history? So think less like a Ken Burns documentary and more like one of Shakespeare's history plays, like Henry V.
And you know what? This theory holds up really, really well. One of the key things about dramatic history is that you're trying to tell a massive story to a general audience, but you don't have a lot of space, so what do? You use techniques like condensation and sampling. The gospel writers are masters at this. They'll show you one specific healing or one specific conflict with the authorities, and that one story stands in for maybe dozens of others that happened. It's a super smart way to give you the big picture without getting bogged down in details, and it keeps the story moving. And that brings us to our final suspect. What if we're looking at this all wrong? What if the Gospels aren't one single flowing narrative, but are actually a collection of stories? A compilation of all these individual incidents, speeches, and sayings that were probably floating around on their own before someone gathered them all together. And again, there's a lot of strong evidence for this. When you structure it this way, as a collection of short stories, you can pack in an incredible amount of action and variety. It's like, bam, a miracle, then bam, a controversy, now a deep dialogue. This structure is just super effective for showing Jesus' actions, his words, and all the different reactions people had to him. So, we've looked at all four suspects: ancient biography, propaganda, dramatic history, and a collection of stories. Each one has some good evidence. But here's the thing. The real answer isn't that it's just one of them. The secret, the big reveal, is how they all fit together. This is why the Gospels are so tough to pin down. They are essentially a unique hybrid genre. They don't fit neatly into any of our modern boxes, because the authors basically invented a new one. They took several different ancient forms and blended them into something totally new, something incredibly powerful and effective. So, after our literary investigation, here's the final verdict. The foundation, the bedrock, is ancient biography. That's the core. But the way they tell that biographical story is by using all the tools and techniques of dramatic history, things like sampling and condensation. And the whole thing is built like Legos from the structure of a collection of stories. It's a 3-part formula. Okay, so we figured out what they are. That's the whodunit part solved. But now let's look at the how done it. How did the writers actually pull this off? To really get their genius, we need to peek inside their writer's toolkit. And these writers were absolute masters. Their toolkit was seriously sophisticated. First, you've got restraint. They rarely jump in with their own opinions. They just let the action speak for itself. They're also super concise, using very few words to paint a whole scene. They use concrete narration, vivid descriptions, and direct quotes. They're very deliberate in their selection of materials. What they choose to include tells you what's important. And of course, they use that variety and sampling we talked about to keep things fresh and comprehensive. This isn't accidental. It is an incredibly skillful and deliberate way to write. And if you want to see these techniques in action, look no further than how Jesus' own speeches are presented. The artistry there is just incredible. I mean, so many of his teachings are presented as these short, punchy, proverb-like sayings. They're brief, they're memorable, they're structured to be unforgettable. They're kind of like the original sound bites, but with this poetic power that makes them stick in your head for, well, thousands of years. When you break down his speaking style, it's this amazing blend of things. It's poetic, full of imagery. It's aphoristic, with those memorable one-liners we just talked about. It's patterned, using repetition to really hammer a point home. It's also deeply subversive. It's always flipping conventional wisdom on its head. And he fuses genres, mixing things like parables and proverbs together in a single talk. It's just masterful. All right, so we've cracked the case. We've solved the literary mystery of the Gospels. They're this unique hybrid genre built with some brilliant techniques. But so what? What's the big takeaway here? Why does any of this actually matter? Well, here's why it matters. When you realize the Gospels are carefully crafted pieces of literary art, it completely changes how you read them. These are not just simple historical reports being dictated into a tape recorder. No, every single story, every quote, every scene was chosen on purpose. It was shaped by the author to have maximum impact, to get a very specific point across. There's a real genius to the way they're put together. And that really brings us to the final thought. This whole thing, it's not just some dry academic exercise. When you recognize the artistry behind these texts, it's like an invitation to read them with fresh eyes. It challenges you to look past just what is being said and to start appreciating the masterful, intentional, and incredibly powerful way it's all being told. So the real question this leaves us with is, knowing all this, how might it change the way you read them?